Hello and welcome to Gardening with Ben's award-winning podcast, as voted by Grow Your Own magazine and by my followers and listeners. So if you're new to the podcast, make sure you click that subscribe button to stay up to date with all our podcasts, listen back to all our previous episodes, sit back, grab a brew and let's enjoy today's episode. Hello and welcome back to Gardening with Ben. Well, if you're listening to this on Sunday, that is because we've managed to schedule it and it's still published, even though we've not paid a subscription yet because we're waiting for payday on the 25th. So if you want to pay for the subscription for me, feel free to message me. It's only £20. But yeah, hopefully we will get the podcast up and running on Friday again. So I probably won't be able to record what I've been up to on the plot, so you'll have to wait for a big catch up on that one. So we're pre-recording some episodes before to hopefully fill the gaps and keep the podcast going until I can actually record them again and upload them. So what are we going to be talking about today? So today we're going to talk about what you can grow around now outside, because it's going to be a heat wave this week. It's going to be 20 degrees, and sometimes when you're a new gardener it can be quite exciting because people think, oh, I can start growing everything outside now, the weather's turning nice. But no, hold back, do not do it, because the frost will come still and kill them. You could still get snow, we could still get frost, and things can easily get killed in the bad weather, and we wouldn't want that whatsoever. So we are going to be talking about some of the stuff that you can actually grow outside at this time of year, and I will be starting to plant some stuff myself, hopefully in the coming weeks outside, as like I said, the weather's getting warmer now, and hopefully it stays this way, fingers crossed. But knowing UK weather, it certainly won't stay this way. But some of the things that you can start to plant outside are, you can start growing your potatoes outside. Now these are usually our first earlies. They can usually be planted around now. My dad was talking about planting his. He grows his in tubs rather than in ground because he seems to get better crops from them. So he's going to be growing his in tubs this year, and he's going to be planting them this week. I'm going to be looking at possibly planting my earlies this week, and usually I plant them on Good Friday, and obviously Good Friday changes every single year, but sometimes Good Friday can be in March, and Good Friday is obviously all to do with the moon, so that is the reason why I usually stick to Good Friday. But you can start to get them in the ground now. Obviously they need to be deep in the ground, at least a spade depth deep, and when you're growing them, if they do start popping up out of the ground, the green shoots, you need to cover them back up with soil, because if the cold frost gets to them or the snow, it will kill them, it will scorch them, it can turn them black, the plants. And I've seen so many photos. One year we had a really late frost in May, and everybody was showing how much their potatoes got damaged by it. Thankfully I'd covered mine up with soil, and people had fleeced theirs over because they knew this frost was coming. And I always keep it, I did last year, I always kept my eyes on the temperature, because I worked at a garden centre, so we had to check the temperature every night to see what it was going down to, so whether we had to protect the plants or not. So it's worth off checking the temperature every night before you go to bed, or in the afternoon, to see what it's going to be like that night. And you can always prepare yourself, because you can put stuff outside in this warm weather. You can start your seeds off outside, but obviously fetch them indoors if it's going to drop to so many degrees, because you don't want to kill those plants off. You've put all the effort into growing them, you don't want them to die, do you? So yeah, that is the main thing to do. So obviously you can start your potatoes now, like I said, and another good thing to start now are your onion sets. Now, many garden centres and DIY shops will be selling bags of onions. Now, I won't be growing onion sets this year. I've grown all my onions from seed. Now, you can still start off onions from seed now, but a good time to start onions off from seed usually is January, February time to get them growing so that they can grow big enough in time for harvesting. So we're going to look at possibly maybe getting those in the ground this week, which is exciting. And obviously growing onions, you need to make sure that you do net them up, because pigeons absolutely love them, especially the ones that are bulbs, because they'll just come down and they'll pull the bulbs out of the soil. So many people lose their onion bulbs through pigeons pulling them out, and they're a bugger for just eating the tops off the onions, and that can damage them. It can stop the plant from growing properly, and that is really frustrating. So make sure you protect them from the pigeons and stop them from getting at them. So hopefully we're going to be getting some onions in this week. Another good one to start at this time of year is spring onions. You can start your spring onions again outside, and I asked for gardening tips the other day, and somebody posted a fantastic gardening tip for spring onions. They say not to grow spring onions in rows, but to plant so many in a pot, and then once they've started germinating, plant the clump into the ground and let it grow as a clump rather than as a row, because when you're picking spring onions, you pick them as a clump of spring onions, really. It's the same when you go in a shop, they're a clump of spring onions, so it's perfect really. So I'm going to try that this year, and I do love finding tips off other people. Again, gardening, you're always learning every single day of the year. So learning all these tips is fantastic from other people. And if you've got any gardening tips and advice, please do send it, mate. I do take everything on board, and I do appreciate it. So please do send your gardening tips and advice to me. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, so send me a message, and I often reply to people, so please do that. Also, another good thing to start at this time of year is your broad beans. If you've not started your broad beans off through winter, you can be starting them off now in the ground. Or a good way to start broad beans sometimes is in pots, because again, the pigeons can be a pain. They'll eat the tops off them and kill the plants. And also mice and rats love them as well. So growing them in pots, you can grow them to get them established and growing well, and then you can plant them out where you want them to in evenly spaced rows. So yeah, it's ways and roundabouts really. It's what you want to do. Obviously if you're growing them in pots as well, you obviously have to use compost, but if you're growing them in the ground, you can sometimes just grow them straight in the soil. So it's up to you which way you want to do it. Another good thing to grow at this time of year is early peas. Now, starting a batch off now, you can start some off in a few weeks' time as well. You can plant them in succession so that you're getting a constant harvest of peas, because all the peas seem to be ready at the same time when you grow them, and obviously when you pick them all at the same time, that's it, over and done with. So you want a few batches growing along the allotment, so maybe start some off every couple of weeks and further down your allotment plot, so keep them growing all through the year, and yeah, grow them in succession so then you keep getting a harvest of peas. And if you're anything like me, the peas won't make it home. The worst thing about peas is trying them once they're ready. Once you've tried them straight from the pod, there is no going back. They're so juicy, so tasty, so delicious that you'll absolutely love them. So yeah, peas are a good thing to grow at this time of year outside. So yeah, that has been our podcast for today. It's been a nice short little episode talking about what you can sow in this time of year. And obviously this is the second podcast of the day, if it has let me publish it. We did do a podcast earlier in the day talking all about spring, so if you've not listened to that one, go back and listen to that one. Also, please do check out my other podcast channel called Gardening and Allotment Tips Podcast, and there's about 45 episodes on there, just talking about different topics each episode. whereas we talk about a lot of different things in these episodes. On my Gardening and Allotment Tips podcast, we just talk about one specific topic only and go over it in depth. So have a listen to that. The link is in the description of this one, but you can find it called Gardening and Allotment Tips podcast. It's a green picture with my lovely face on it, so check it out. And also check out my gardening t-shirts as well. There's a link in this description. There's some funny t-shirts on there, ideal for gifts and presents or for yourself, and it all goes back towards purchasing things for my allotment and paying for this podcast. Hopefully we can sell 4 t-shirts this weekend and then we can keep this podcast going. But yeah, thank you for all your support that you do give us. And as always, remember, keep smiling, keep gardening, and keep listening to Gardening with Ben's podcasts. So thank you for listening to today's episode of Gardening with Ben. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Remember to do click that subscribe button to stay up to date with all our podcasts. Feel free to share them on your Instagram stories so that it spreads the word about my podcast and we get lots more listeners. Feel free to check out my social media sites, Facebook and Instagram as well, Gardening with Ben, and also my YouTube channel, to stay up to date with all my handy videos, how-to videos, and sharing my tips and advice. And feel free to check the link as well in the description for my Gardening with Ben t-shirts. Lots of funny gardening design t-shirts in there for you to purchase at great prices too. So thanks again, and as always, remember, keep smiling and keep gardening.